All right. So why don't I kick off, Ian? I'll do a little bit of overview and then toss it to you to talk more about the program. Does that work?
That sounds great.
Okay. Beautiful. Thank you everyone so much again for hopping in here to learn more about the cap-exempt H-1B visa, the Build Fellowship. This is an insane time in the immigration world, and I'm sure a lot of you are here because you're filled with maybe a little bit of uncertainty right now and are trying to get good information, which is what you have absolute control over, and making sure you have pathways mapped out, the right resources, the right people behind you. That's so important right now in this moment. So thrilled that we can be able to be a resource for you. You saw for 1 second my colleague Danielle just hopped on here as well, and he's been developing tons and tons of resources in the immigration space in general, which is very much in line with our organization's mission here at the Build Fellowship to get good information to you all so that you can, again, be prepared for whatever is next on your journey and make the best decisions that you can. So again, thrilled to be here to talk about the Build Fellowship by Open Avenues. And the solution that we specifically have, I'm here with my colleague Ian Davis, who is the Director of Partnerships at Build. We've been working every day to get as much, to talk to as many folks as possible. Ian is day in, day out trying to meet with folks like you all here. So if you are able to connect with him at another point and have specific questions, he's happy to answer them. I started uh, about 7 years ago now, Open Avenues Foundation with my father, Jeff Goldman. Jeff is an immigration attorney who is a brilliant mind and legal strategist. He came up with this concept for a cap-exempt H-1B part-time fellowship program, and we've been building together since to create this pathway to really pave the way for individuals to have a unique solution when everything and everyone tells you that there's a barrier with the lottery or anything else. This is a really good way to be able to think a little bit differently. And so we're here to talk about some of those specifics, but I want to first outline what's out there because you're probably hearing a lot about the what we call the alphabet soup of immigration. It's just lots of letters and numbers, and it can be a bit confusing. But for anybody here who understands OPT, optional practical training coming out of school, you know that after you finish your OPT, or if you're coming from abroad, you really do need to be thinking about a temporary work visa. Because green cards, while they are, uh, the ideal long-term outcome, they do take a while to process, and you need, time to be able to bridge between OPT and a green card most times. And so I wanted to outline first just a few of these options that exist here so that you know that we're here to, so that you're informed with information and know that whatever path you choose is right. So one, I'm just going to briefly say that the O1 visa is for extraordinary ability individuals who reach 3 out of 8 requirements. And a few of those requirements include publishing your work. They could include being the judge of others' work within your field. That could mean you've been a judge of a hackathon, or something along those lines. Another criteria is that you've received awards and recognition. These are some of the examples, and you can find these 8 criteria anywhere. But you do, for an O1, need a sponsor and or an agent, which we can talk about at the end of this presentation. The L1 visa is for folks who work for a multinational company, one that has locations in the US and outside the United States, and you can prove that you've been working outside the United States for that company for at least 1 year in a manager role. And so if you can prove that you've done that work for 1 year and you're coming to work for the US entity, then you can qualify for an L1. The TN visa is also very common. but it really only applies to folks from Canada or Mexico in STEM fields. Some of those fringe fields are, economics or business, but really it's the core STEM fields that qualify for TN. F1 CPT is for folks who are in school, and this could be, after you've run out of options. A lot of folks will consider this F1 CPT option to continue, where you go back to school, you get another degree, and you enroll part-time while you work. Those are F1 CPT programs. They will be under scrutiny in the new Trump administration. And so therefore there are some schools that you just need to make sure it's legitimate if that's the path you go down. H-1B is what we're going to talk about in a second. And lastly, I'll talk about E-2s, which are a visa for folks that are investing in a US company. And you have to be from a treaty country. So there's a list of treaty countries around the world. If you're from one of those countries and you're either investing in a company or starting a company with foreign investment from one of those treaty countries, you qualify for an E2, and it's worth looking into that as well. An H-1B is the most common work visa in the US. We just talked about a lot of visas that have specific requirements, and the H-1B has the fewest, if you will, and it applies to the most people, which is why probably all of you are here, because you just need to have at least a bachelor's degree and work that relates to that degree. So if you have a bachelor's, master's, PhD, you're a postdoc, you qualify, but you have to show that the work that you're going to do for an employer is related to the work that you do for that you studied in school. So there has to be that tie there for an H-1B application. So obviously it's the most common work visa because it applies to really any folks that graduate from school and are looking for jobs in their field. So hundreds of thousands of people are applying every year. Last year, upwards of 400,000 people applied, and we're looking at about 30% is actually fairly high for a selection rate. It's really about 25%. There were 2 lotteries in the last couple of years to reach this cap of 85,000 to make sure that the government picked 85,000 people out of those 400,000 who actually were going to apply for H-1B. And after both of those lottery selections, there was a net to about 25% selection rate. So that's what we saw. Even though the first lottery was actually much lower, it was about a 15 to 20% selection rate. By the end of the second lottery, it did go up to about 25%. We think maybe this year 25 could be 30% selection rates, but we're not going to see a big change from last year. In fact, last year there were changes already made to the H-1B lottery process to ensure that there's no fraud, meaning you can only have one application per person go in, get selected. So you could have multiple applications in there, but they're all going to be tied to you with one. You have one chance. You have one chance in the lottery. So one of the most unknown categories that we're here to talk about today, and I'm going to just tell you about this and then have Ian talk about our program, is the cap-exempt H-1B. Because cap-exempt H-1Bs are for 4 types of organizations in the US to sponsor at any time of year. Same qualifications as H-1B, bachelor's degree, working in the field. But they're not subject to the annual lottery. They can be filed at any time of year, and they have the same qualifications. So if you know you qualify for H-1B, you qualify for cap-exempt H-1B. Except they have to be sponsored by one of these 4 organizations, which are universities, government research institutions, nonprofit research institutions, or nonprofits affiliated with colleges and universities. And if you work part-time or full-time for any of these companies, you qualify for cap-exempt H-1B. And going back to how I started, where Jeff Goldman, my father and co-founder, decided that there was a better way to to do this and a cool, more unique solution here. He came to me and said, Danielle, if people work just 5 hours a week for one of these types of organizations, then they could go and work for any US company for full time in a cap exempt H-1B as well, even though those companies won't be cap exempt, meaning many of you on the call probably work for a startup or a tech company, or maybe you work for a finance company. Whatever company you work for, most likely it's not cap exempt. If it is, that's awesome. They can file a full-time visa. But if you want to keep working for those companies, you could consider working part-time for one of these kinds of entities, these 4 companies, and then you can qualify full-time without the lottery to work for your current employer. So I'm going to turn it over to Ian to talk a little bit more about what the Build Fellowship does, and how we're structured with these universities, et cetera.
Sure. Thanks, Danielle. That was great. Most of you on the call here today maybe already know me because we've had conversations. And if you have interest in the fellowship, chances are you're probably going to talk to me at some point. Just to kind of give you a quick background on me, I'm the director here. I've been working in immigration and international education now for almost 20 years. Don't tell anybody. There's a lot of gray in this beard right now. But I'm always excited to kind of talk about the different pathways here that we have. And I think, Danielle, you just did a really great job explaining the various options. Many of you here are probably here because you have the lottery coming up in March and you're maybe looking for like a backup plan. Maybe you don't want to do a CPT program, or you're trying to get out of your CPT program, or your company doesn't want to support that anymore, or whatever it may be. So we'll walk through this whole process. So as Danielle mentioned, the Build Fellowship, we are a cap-exempt organization, right? And we have that status, as Danielle mentioned, because of our nonprofit's affiliation with universities, okay? On the screen here, you can see the 15 different universities we are currently partnered with. We're always adding more to our roster as well. And by partnering with these universities, this is how we maintain this cap-exempt status. So the model of our fellowship for cap-exempt H-1B is that we work with highly skilled foreign nationals. As Danielle mentioned earlier, to qualify for the H-1B, you have to meet certain requirements, certain educational requirements, certain professional requirements, working within a specialty occupation field, right? So we work with these highly skilled foreign nationals to create with them an experiential learning project that is based on their specific area of expertise, right? This project is meant to represent the work that they do within their specific field on a regular basis, right? So if I'm a mechanical engineer working for XYZ company, that's my daily life, right? Work life, right? Let's create a project that kind of represents the work that I do that can be offered then to our university partners for undergraduate and graduate students to apply to and participate in, to gain some practical knowledge in this field, because they eventually want to work in this field as well. So it's really beneficial for the students because they have an opportunity to learn from someone who has the job that they eventually want once they're done with school. There's also another additional advantage in the fact that a lot of our fellows come from STEM fields, right? And a lot of STEM departments in various universities are predominantly foreign nationals, right? And so it's a great opportunity for these students who are foreign nationals themselves on F1 visas to study from another foreign national who may be a few years ahead in their career and kind of looking at a pathway. So the university benefits because there's more internship opportunities for their students, because a lot of these programs have that requirement. The students benefit because they're getting some practical knowledge in a field that they eventually want to work in. And then the foreign national is benefiting because by working as a fellow for 5 hours per week, leading this remote project, you then qualify for this cap-exempt H-1B visa, okay? Once you have this cap-exempt H-1B visa through the fellowship, as Danielle mentioned, you can work for any employer in the United States, whether it's public or private, startup or well-established, so long as this company is willing to file what's called a concurrent petition, okay? concurrent petitions and the rules of the H-1B visa state that you can actually have multiple employers on just the one visa, so long as each additional employer files one of these concurrent petitions. Okay. So the legal basis of the H-1B is the 5 hours a week that you're working as a fellow, right? But once you have that with the concurrent petition, you can also work full time for another employer as well. So basically, one visa, two jobs, right? Um, so this is a fully remote fellowship. It's important to note a lot of questions, come up of, oh, do I need to be in Boston? Do I need to be in, Chicago or wherever these universities are? No, it's fully remote. Okay. So you can do this from wherever you want to, in the country, wherever you're based, right? And the 5 hour a week commitment, it really is that. Okay, that's important to know. Like a lot of times individuals who are coming to us from like day one CPT programs, they're kind of tired of the grind of having to have half their brain committed to grad school and half their brain to their job. When we say 5 hours a week, we really do mean 5 hours a week. Okay. All right, Danielle, now I'm ready for the next slide. Okay. So in terms of timeline, in terms of process, I think it's really important to kind of like outline how everything works. Okay. It's first of all, before we talk about the steps for procuring the H-1B visa, I want to let everyone know that the Build Fellowship is not a permanent solution, nor is it meant to be a permanent solution. Okay. And so what I mean by that is a couple of things. Number one, the H-1B visa that is the cap-exempt H-1B visa through the fellowship is valid for 3 years and it can be renewed one time. So for a total of 6 years, right? But the thing is, the kind of the running joke here at the fellowship is all of our fellows, their goal is to not have to be a fellow, right? And we fully support that, right? It's basically as soon as you start the fellowship, individuals are looking for ways to exit and what to find a more permanent long-term immigration solution. So how do you do that, right? Ultimately, the end goal is your green card. And what Danielle was mentioning earlier about H-1B visas being the most sought after kind of coveted visa, one of the reasons that is because it's what's considered called dual intent visa, which allows you to actually start the perm process to work towards your green card, right? So when you're in the fellowship, your employer can still put you in the H-1B lottery every year, right? Can start the perm process so you can work towards that green card. For those of you with advanced degrees, and as Danielle mentioned, maybe some international publications and acclaim and recognition, build towards that O1 profile, right? There's just a variety of different ways that you can be looking to exit the fellowship through a more long-term solution, okay? The fellowship, we really kind of view ourselves as a stopgap in a lot of ways. You came to the US, you did your education here, you did 3 years of OPT, STEM OPT, you didn't win the lottery. Now you're in the fellowship until you can win the lottery or until you get your EAD through the green card process, etc. Okay. So the maximum amount of time is 6 years, but the actual average for our fellows is right around 18 months, right? So it's something where we celebrate every October when we have our group of fellows who have won the lottery, transition from the cap-exempt H-1B through the fellowship to the capped H-1B through the lottery. But we have a celebration, kind of like a graduation party for them, because that's the end goal, right? So let's talk a little bit then about the timeline it takes to get this visa, right? Because some of you here today may be kind of preparing for the upcoming lottery. And if your OPT is expiring, let's say in June or July, hopefully not even, maybe even May, you're kind of like, okay, but we got to like start talking about priority here, right? So the way the process works is it starts with an initial consultation like with myself, right? We're going to talk a little bit about how the fellowship works. We're going to communicate with your company or your benefactors about how the process of concurrent visas work, right? And then eventually we're going to have you submit what we call intake forms. These intake forms are where we collect the foreign nationals' transcripts, diploma, work history, immigration history, job description, resume. I mean, you name it, we ask for it, right? If you didn't earn your degree in the United States, you're going to have to do an educational equivalency evaluation because that's a requirement by USCIS. We're going to go through this entire process. So for the company or the benefactor, a little bit more basic information. What state are you registered in? Who's your attorney? These types of things. We use all this information to conduct an evaluation. Our immigration team reviews everything and they take a look at it to determine a few things. Number one, what is the specialty occupation that we're going to file on the petition, right? For some people, it's very straightforward. Some of you maybe have multiple degrees in various fields. And so we kind of have to determine, okay, what's the strongest case to make with USCIS? Along with that, we determine what the prevailing wage is that's associated with the specialty occupation. For those of you who are unaware or unfamiliar with the term prevailing wage, this is a rule the Department of Labor has that when you hire a foreign national on an H-1B visa, you have to pay them what they call a fair prevailing wage. And that wage is based on the specialty occupation and then the county and state in which you are living, or the foreign national is living, okay? That's important for us at the fellowship because when you work as a fellow for 5 hours per week leading your project, we pay you, and we pay you based on the prevailing wage for your specialty occupation, okay? In general, for most of our fellows on a monthly basis, this works out to be somewhere between, I would say, $900 to maybe $1,500 per month, kind of depending on what you do professionally, okay? So we know it. We look at what is the specialty occupation, what's the prevailing wage. Then we also take a look at the immigration history and everything else involved because we want to do our due diligence to make sure that if we do file this petition with USCIS, it's going to be approved. And if there's any reason, if there's any red flag or roadblock that we identified, we're not going to move forward with the petition. It's as simple as that. We're not here to waste anyone's time or money in this process, okay? But if we do the evaluation, we're like, everything looks good, rock solid, we're ready to move forward. From there, we go through contracting, we go through invoicing. That process, that whole thing I just described, about 2 weeks, okay? Once we're ready to move forward, we have a few weeks where we're going to go through petition development, right? Kind of build the basic framework of the petition based on what the project may end up being, right? Kind of tuning in the job description and all these different things to make sure that when we file the petition with USCIS, it gets the green light, okay? When we file using premium processing. So what that means is USCIS will issue an approval within 15 business days, okay? Now, there's always a chance that a petition receives what's called a request for evidence, or RFE. That's not super common, but it is, common enough. 1 in 10, 1 in 5, maybe we'll get one of these, okay? We do our due diligence to try to make that to minimize that as much as humanly possible, okay? But once the initial H-1B petition is approved, typically within the first 15 business days, from there, the fellowship will begin on either the 1st or the 15th, or the 16th of the month, okay? And when the fellowship begins, that's when the employer can file the concurrent petition. And the way the process works is if you are already in the United States, right, we'll be filing a change of status for you, right? And so what that means is your employer, once they file their concurrent petition, once it's received by USCIS, you're legally authorized to begin working, right? You don't have to wait for that concurrent petition to be approved because you're able to work while it's pending approval, okay? If you're not in the United States right now, there's some additional steps and we can talk about it offline on a one-on-one consultation. But so all of that said, that entire process I just outlined, from when you send us the intake forms to filing the petition to getting it approved and filing that concurrent petition, that whole process usually takes between 8 to 12 weeks, okay? Depending on, if everyone's kind of working and rowing the boat in the same direction or timing of things. Can it take longer? Absolutely. If we get requests for evidence, of course. Can it take less time? Yeah, but I think a healthy timeline is typically 8, 10, maybe up to 12 weeks. Okay. Next slide, please, Danielle. So this is a really great example here of kind of like the fellowship, who is using the fellowship, and the success rate we have. So we currently have over 200 active fellows right now. We have companies in a variety of fields. It's not just STEM related, but it's all up and down the list. Our approval rate is actually greater than 99%. That's one of the main questions we get a lot of times. Like, okay, well, if we go through this whole process, what are the chances my petition is going to be denied? Right. Um, we have a greater than 99% success rate. And I think the main reason behind that is that we do our due diligence on the front end. Okay. That evaluation I just described, we really do make sure that if we are going to move forward with filing a petition, that it's airtight. Okay. If there's any reason we feel that USCIS is going to deny it, chances are we're not going to move forward. Okay. Um, we have trained thousands of U.S. college students from our various partner universities. And so the truth of the matter is that the fellowship is growing and it's becoming more and more um, recognized around the country. One of the more common questions I get is, well, why haven't I not heard of this before? It's like, well, it's not something that you can just slap on. We go around slapping billboards up around the country. The truth of the matter is that um, with increased scrutiny likely occurring with day one CPT programs, L1 visa programs kind of being more difficult, countries like Canada reducing the number of residents they are accepting and increasing the cost of residencies, more and more organizations are going to be looking at at various H-1B alternative pathways. And the Build Fellowship, I very much consider us one of like the gold standard when it comes to alternative H-1B pathways. So what's next on the screen here? Yeah, so I mean, the reality is the H-1B visa and the Build Fellowship, we do have requirements to participate. This is not for everybody. Okay. That's also why we have such high success rate, is because the truth is you have to have a specific area of skills in order to qualify for H-1Bs, right? Just like with the lottery, have to have a bachelor's or a master's degree, a PhD, STEM or business related field, right? 2+ years of experience. Prefer they have experience mentoring or working with students as well. I understand that there's a lot of anxiety involved with maybe working with American university students, especially if English is not your first language, right? And we totally understand that, and that's where our educational programming comes in to work with you to make sure that that's something that is communicated clearly. And then you also have to have a job offer from a U.S. employer. That's a really important thing. The Build Fellowship, we do not provide resources for jobs. Okay, I want to make that very clear. And I'm going to say that again. If you do not have an employer right now, we are not going to provide you with a list of companies that are looking to hire you. That's not what we do. We're not a staffing or placement agency. Okay. But if you have a skill set, if you have an occupation that is employable and you have a company that's interested in hiring you, then that's where we come in. Okay. Ben, great question. What if I'm a founder of a US company? Yep. We have founders on staff here or in our fellowship as well. So the Department of Labor has some additional requirements that you have to meet in order to self-sponsor and work for yourself. But entrepreneurs that come to the United States that start their own businesses do qualify for our fellowship. And we can talk offline separately about this.
And Ian, I'd love to also note here that the new H-1B rule that was just published on January 17th actually makes it a lot easier for foreign nationals to qualify for H-1B, because they changed the reality that says that it used to be that if you own more than 50% of your entity, it was seen as a reason why you don't qualify, because it's not an employer-employee relationship.
Right.
But they got rid of that guidance. And so now, even if you own more than 50% of your entity, you can qualify for H-1B. So we already did this for folks who were founders, but now even more so, the path is absolutely open.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you for clarifying on that, Danielle, because that does come up
Yeah.
quite a bit.
Yeah.
Okay, so when we talk about the financial commitment, though, so this is obviously a big component of this. The programming fees for the fellowship are a flat monthly rate of per month. Okay, so what does that cover and what's involved in that? So number one, everything involving the petition for the fellowship is covered under that. So all of the administrative costs, all the USCIS filing fees, all of our attorney fees for the firm to file the petition. If we get a request for evidence, that's covered. If we need to file an amendment to the petition because you maybe move or something along those lines, that's covered. If you have dependents that need an H-4 visa, those are covered. Also, if you get to the point where you actually need to file an extension for your H-1B because you're nearing that 3-year mark, those are included as well. Then obviously ongoing compliance and programming. And then a big component of this is the compensation that the fellow receives. Okay, so as I mentioned before, those 5 hours a week that the fellow is working, they get paid for that. And that's usually, as I mentioned, somewhere between $900 to maybe $1,500 per month. That's funded by the programming fee. Okay, so what that means is the true cost of the fellowship is typically $4,000 per month minus whatever that compensation is. So it's usually somewhere around $2,500 to $3,000 per month. Okay. And so that is something where you can have the peace of mind knowing that you have a firm and you have an organization that is going to ensure that you are compliant along the way. You're never going to fall out of status, and you have the peace of mind knowing that you have your H-1B secured and you can start the process of applying for firm and whatnot. All right. What do we have next? Oh, so this is just a great example. Felix is awesome, by the way. Great guy. Just some really cool stuff I mean, all of our fellows are amazing, right? And that's one of the joys of my job is I get to talk every day with these brilliant individuals who are doing just amazing things in the United States and working towards kind of like making a life and making a career here. And Felix is a great example of that. Ben, you asked earlier about being a founder. Well, Felix is the founder of his organization, right? And so Orb Labs has been with us for a while. As you can see here, he used the fellowship as a way to continue to work and live in the United States after a few H-1B lottery attempts. And he's just a great example. And we have literally hundreds of these, right? And so this is something where you could go down the line of every one of our fellows, and they're probably going to have something, a really inspirational, amazing story that they could share as well. So what do we have next here? Okay, Danielle, now it's time for you to shine. Let's talk a little bit about the O1 program, and then we are going to have some time here at the end for Q&A. Xavier, I did see your question about maybe asking a few questions here at the end. Absolutely. So go ahead, Danielle.
Yeah, I'm going to keep this pretty high level because I want to make sure that we get to have a Q&A here. But I want to tell you about a new program we run that might be something applicable for some of you on the call. One of the things that we also recognized over time was that the O1, which is the Extraordinary Ability Visa, is something that individuals actually do qualify for when they have, you just need 3 of these 8 criteria. But once individuals are working for a company in an O1, if you want to go move to another company, you have to file another O1. And so one of the things that we actually, Jeff, again, who created this model, he had run a program for athletes to come on an O1 through an agent. And we now have created an agent program beyond just athletes, but rather we can actually sponsor the O1 through our agent program, Build Extraordinary, and individuals who qualify for an O1 can work for multiple employers under that agent sponsored O1. So if you want to go work for your own startup, plus you want to advise and get paid for another startup, and you want to, do some consulting on the side over here, you can do that because you can have your O1 with an agent versus having it with one of those entities and having to have 3 different O1s sponsored for you. So This is giving individuals who are going down the O1 path a little bit more autonomy over your time and your career pathway. So I'll stop there. We can talk about it, but I love to start with a Q&A about the cap exempt H-1B. And then at the end, if there's anything related to O1, we'll go down that path as well. So I'll stop sharing my screen here. And folks can, you can raise your hand, or please feel free, you can come onto the screen and ask us a question. Xavier, I see you're first. Do you want to hop in here? And I might need to allow you to talk.
Hello.
How's it
This
going?
is
Hi,
Xavier
Xavier.
Antonia Canero. I'm a long-term attorney, many, many years, 40 years. I know your dad very well.
Okay.
And I was referred by other attorneys to your program. I had 3 technical questions
Sure.
and basically to figure out how the payment works. So you pay $4,000 a month from the time you get your visa, or $4,000 from the time you do a contract?
The
Yeah.
latter. So when we start contracting, right? Because as you're probably well aware, there's work that goes into preparing the actual petition before it's filed, right? Like filing the LCA and petition development, and our attorneys, obviously bill for that sort of thing. So, so invoicing begins at contracting.
Okay, and let's say I stop in 8 months, that's the end of the payment of the 4,000?
That's a great question. So we do have a 12-month minimum term of our contracts.
Okay.
Okay. And the reason we have a minimum term on that, and this comes up quite a bit, is the initial cost for the fellowship to actually procure the visa is pretty substantial to us as an organization, right? And so we essentially have a minimum 12 months to ensure that we make up that investment on the front end.
Okay, and you do not accept external immigration attorneys? Since I've been working with Javier now for almost 2 years, and you guys prefer to do it, I think for obvious reasons, in-house.
So you
Oh,
can file the concurrent petition, absolutely.
No, no, no. I'm
That's
talking about if we wanted to negotiate to cut some cost.
uh,
No,
right.
not
No,
necessarily.
because the Goldman Partners represents us and files all of our initial petitions. It's just a quality control thing for us. And then external third-party firms can handle the concurrent petition.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Okay. And may I ask why it's 8 weeks?
The programming?
No, the filing of the H-1B. I
Well,
mean, if I
that's
give you
that.
guys the stuff, can you move it up a little bit?
Yeah,
You know,
absolutely. I mean, the
I
reality
know.
is yeah, so we do our initial petition development kickoff usually immediately after contracting. And what that involves is working with our immigration team, collecting the job descriptions, working with the foreign national to put together the scope of the fellowship of the actual project that they're going to be leading, because that eventually is going to be the job that we file on the actual petition, right? And if everyone's rowing in the same direction, as I said before, like we can get it done faster than that. But the truth is, sometimes people aren't exactly quick to respond to certain
I
things,
know, I know
right?
that 100%. So we have everything
Uh,
ready and we're in a short turnaround, and I
sure.
get it in
Yes.
before the craziness of the H-1B lottery,
oh yeah.
because we have his
Oh, yes.
family in Ecuador. So I'm just trying to see, we've already got the national interest waiver approved. So we're just trying to
Oh, good.
bridge, and he's got a great
Sure.
little niche there that we can, I'm sure you'll find something wonderful to do. But I wondered if, we could reduce that 8 weeks.
Yeah, we could talk offline about this,
Okay,
but I think that's
thank you.
absolutely, I
I just
mean,
didn't,
it's a ballpark, we don't want to say, oh, we can do it in 2 weeks and then
We
it,
prefer to give a conservative
I
estimation
hear
sure.
you.
there.
I hear you.
And, but I'll tell this group here only that our record is 20 days. So
Fabulous.
we've done this much faster, and we obviously are very conscious of individuals' timelines and things going on. Someone told us last week, we have a demo day in March. We have to try to get this done before that time. And, we're always trying to work within these different constraints, which is the nature of immigration. But yes, the 8 weeks is our estimate.
Thank you so much.
Yeah,
Of course.
thanks for joining today. Anyone else? I see
We have
that.
Suma here. Suma, I am a software professional. I have some questions. May I ask the questions?
Uma, I just gave you permission to jump in here. If you want to ask your questions. I think you're on mute.
Okay.
Yeah.
While we're waiting for Suma, Mark asked the question, is the concurrent petition charged differently? And is it the same cost as filing the non-cap exempt petition? So that's a good question, Mark. So the concurrent petition is something that is not included in the programming fees for the fellowship, right? The cost of a concurrent petition, it depends on the size of your organization, whether there's more or less than 25 employees, but USCIS filing fees, ballpark, probably somewhere between $3,000 to $3,500 in that range. And then whatever the attorney that you're working with charges to do the filing. Okay. So that's something that it's a little bit different. It's more or less, I like to say it's kind of in the same ballpark of what a company pays if you win the H-1B lottery and you have to file everything. It's right around the same cost. Okay, Suma, are you there? Do you want to type in the questions or are you gonna unmute?
Or if anybody else has a question, you can go ahead and raise your hand. Okay, Karthikeyan. How'd I do? Is that how to say your name?
Yeah, you're close.
Okay.
No problem. So my question is actually a follow-up on what I'd asked before. So I asked for the financing. So who's supposed to pay who? That is where I'm getting a little confused. I heard it's 4,000 a month now. How does that can you simplify it a little more if you can?
Yeah, so typically the benefactor, and the term benefactor is the person who's going to be paying the billed fellowship, right? There's really kind of like two main options. The most common way is the employer is the one that acts as the benefactor. So let's say I'm a foreign national, I've been in the US on my OPT, I'm working for a company, I don't win the lottery, they want to retain me, right? They're going to act as the benefactor. They will contract with the billed fellowship and pay the programming fees. Okay, the 4,000 per month, right? Out of that 4,000 per month, you, the foreign national, you're going to get a paycheck from our nonprofit provider for, as I mentioned, somewhere between $900 to $1,500 per month based on your prevailing wage. Okay.
Okay.
So you actually will be a W-2 employee for both your primary employer and for the nonprofit. Okay. The alternative, if the primary employer is unable or unwilling to act as a benefactor, the alternative is what we call a third-party benefactor, right? So the Department of Labor has a rule that we can't contract with any individual person, okay? So we are required to contract with actual entities, with companies, okay? That can be a company that you own and operate yourself, right? As long as you meet all the legal requirements. Or that can be a company that a friend or family member owns and operates as well, right? And so you have some options there.
Okay, yeah. So that was a little unclear. I mean, hence the question, nothing else. Thank you.
Hey, my pleasure. Suma says, somehow not able to unmute. I have done my bachelor's and I have not done my master's. Am I eligible for cap-exempt H-1B if not billed fellowship? Okay. Suma, it depends on the field. You mentioned that you are a software developer, right? So if you have a bachelor's degree, as we showed on the screen earlier, most specialty occupations have a minimum requirement of a bachelor's degree and 2 years of experience. So the answer would be probably, depending on your background.
Yeah, and Benjamin, you were wondering about residence. You asked about residence, which I think comes back to understanding the difference between, what does residence mean in the US and the immigration world? Residence typically is how you describe permanent residence, which is a green card pathway. What we're talking about is a temporary work visa, which does allow you to live in the US and work in the US and in a temporary status. So yes, I mean, this program gives you this temporary work visa status. And then, it gives you the ability, as Ian talked about, because it has dual intent with H-1B, it allows you also to be on a pathway towards green card, because you can apply for a green card while you're in the H-1B visa status.
That's right.
You just asked a really interesting follow-up question about the minimum wage needing to be $60,000, because that is a common misconception. But if you apply for part-time work, then you just have to get paid the fair wage, which is an hourly rate. And so you don't need to get paid more than $60,000 to qualify in general for H-1B, but you definitely don't need to get paid $60,000 to qualify for the cap exempt H-1B part-time.
That's right. Okay, so someone asked anonymously, and I'll just read this question. Hello, if someone is already on H-1B cap exempt and whose job is going to end in a month, how would we approach Open Avenues Foundation? Danielle, do you want to handle that?
Yep. So I mean, here's the deal. If you're already on a cap exempt H-1B, unfortunately, you can't just transfer this visa. We would need to file a new H-1B for you, for our organization, because you're leaving that employer. So this isn't a concurrent situation. We're actually going to file a new visa for you. So if you are leaving your job, unfortunately, it doesn't matter whether it's cap exempt or a regular, cap subject employer. You still will need to. You could work with Open Avenues Foundation, but you still will need an entity to hire you and sponsor your full-time visa, which is the idea of having the concurrent employment, right? So this is a path for you to work for a different cap exempt organization, but unfortunately it doesn't give you any really different path other than the way everyone else comes into our program.
Yeah, I mean, this question has come up sometimes. I mean, the truth is the role, the job at the fellowship is entirely different than the job or role you have at your current cap exempt H-1B provider. So nothing would change in terms of the process for us. And also the time that you spent on your H-1B already counts towards those 3 + 3 years. So if you've been on an H-1B now for, let's say, 5 years, you only have 1 year left or whatever it may be. So
that's a good point, Ian. You have a total of 6 years, and you can keep extending only if you have your I-140 for your green card started. But if you're already maxing out there, then that's a good point. Someone just, who did I just give speaking? Chetan? Oh, Abibu. Why don't you go ahead? Abibu, can you speak? I think you should be able to. Okay, we can't hear you, so you feel free to write your question in the chat. Anybody else want to hop in? Okay, Suma. Question.
Hey,
Hi, Suma.
hey, hi, Ayan, hi, Danielle. Yeah, so I'm a software professional and I'm having 20 years of experience, but I have done my bachelor's, but I don't have my master's. So right now I'm on H4 visa and and I don't have any working visa now. So I'm looking for the options whether this cap exempt H1 will work for me for working here or not. In DOL website, I see that for cap exempt H1, so the minimum wage is 60,000, or we have to be having master's degree. So in my case, I'm not having master's.
Yeah.
So how will I be eligible for H1B cap exempt?
Okay, so you're talking about an exemption on the on the documentation itself when filing an H-1B. There are certain exemptions when it comes to the H-1B petition.
Mm-hmm.
It's not an exemption. It doesn't qualify you for H-1B or not.
Mm-hmm.
And if you have a bachelor's degree
Yeah,
and you don't make $60,000,
right.
the entity is qualified as H-1B dependent for other reasons. And if, like, we're getting pretty technical here, so everyone else plug your ears. But if the organization qualifies as H-1B dependent and the individual is not getting paid $60,000 and doesn't have a master's degree,
Mm. Yeah.
then they are not exempt, and
Mm-hmm.
therefore the individual, the organization has to recruit for the position
Mm-hmm.
to show that they have tried to hire or opened it up to other individuals, not just
Oh,
individuals. So that all that compliance is part of our program and is in place. So in the case where, you would apply for this part-time role, you're not getting paid 60,000 and the organization's H-1B dependent, then there is a way for your position to be recruited for,
Mm-hmm.
and then you can qualify. So
Got it.
you're asking great questions, super technical ones, but they're things that obviously our team is thinking about.
Yeah, because
Sure.
my case is that, so I was under the misinterpretation that I may not be qualified for this one, so that's why I'm asking.
Yes, you are qualified.
So
We do have
basically,
recruiting.
the organization which is sponsoring this cap exempt H1, so they can still sponsor if they are saying that they are not finding anyone with minimum wage 60 or masters who has done masters.
They just have to show in an audit that they've done a recruiting process.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And while working with this cap exempt organization, we can still look for other organization who can give us a full-time job, right?
We partner with those other organizations. So to pay for this program, we partner with an employer or a company. If you had another entity set up that could pay for this program, then that is a possibility as well. You cannot, Suma, pay us for this fellowship program.
No, I'm asking that Bill Fellowship would be like helping me to get cap exempt H1B by working with the organization, maybe by working for 5 years, right? And then after that, suppose I want to work for another entity as a full-time
So
employee.
our program is a part-time program that gives you the ability to go work for another company as well at the same time. So you're not in our program working and then you go work for another employer. You're in our program working so that at the same time, concurrently, you can go work for another employer and have your career in the US.
Yeah, so that another employer have to be tied to you, or I can work independently to the another employer?
It has to be tied. Well,
They have to file the concurrent petition, right? That's the legal minimum they have to file. So your legal status is based on the 5 hours a week that you're working as a fellow. That's why you qualify for the cap exempt H-1B. Your full-time employer files this concurrent petition. If you leave the fellowship without another solution, like winning the H-1B lottery or having your green card or an O-1 visa, you lose status as soon as you leave the fellowship. Okay, so it's basically like one visa, two employers. You get the visa through us by working 5 hours a week as a fellow, but this also allows you to work full-time for another company. If you leave the fellowship before you've won the H-1B lottery or you get your green card, you lose status. Okay.
What do you mean by that? So suppose another full-time employer files a H1 for me, and
If you win, if they file an H-1B visa in the lottery and you win, you can leave the fellowship. Yep.
yeah, so if my visa status is changed to H1, then only I can leave, or yeah, before that I can't leave, right? Yeah.
Yeah, unless you have another solution, another visa solution. So,
Mm-hmm.
all right, we got time for one more question. Abibu here, we're just going to go here because Danielle and I, we have another call we got to jump onto as well. I appreciate everyone's time asking all these. These are all great questions, by the way. Abibu, you wanted to know, you're on an E2 visa working as an electrical engineer. Your employer, well, is going to terminate your contract soon. How can I change my status in the next 60 days? The best thing for you to do right now, Abibu, is go to our website, fill out a request for information, and then you and I can set up a call to kind of talk about how this works. It's a tight timeline, but it's not impossible. So.
Yep. Awesome. Well, we are close to time, and I just want to thank everyone so much for joining today, for all of your engagement and your questions. You can email info@buildfellowship.com or go to our website and fill out our forms if you're interested in moving forward with the program. We also have lots of resources on our website, so you can email us for those resources, or if you go around our website, you can find them under the blog section as well, or resources section. There's a lot there. So we hope you find some helpful content. Follow us on LinkedIn. We're always posting things about cap-exempt H-1Bs as well. And we will hopefully be staying in touch. Thanks, everyone.
Awesome. Thank you, Danielle.
Bye.
Thank you.
Take care.